Do a quick assembly. So I'm going to turn at least one of those off. I'm going to leave what we last created. And let's go into assembly view. So I'm going to open that up. We're going to go up here and go insert. There's everything in Part Studio, or you can select one at a time. Let's go ahead and do everything in the Part Studio where it's at, and then we can move these around. I'm going to center that up right over the center of this plate. I'm going to left click on this part, and right now I'm in isometric view. I'm just going to move that one away. I'm going to left click on this part, and I'm going to move it over where I want it. Now, right here, let's go to top view. Let's left click here, and let's get this one over here close. I'm just trying to orient the parts so that they're centered up. Fairly close to the center of the screen. Right here, this is going to allow me to rotate, and you'll notice it gives degrees right over there to the right hand side. I'm going to go 90 degrees this way, and the reason I'm doing that, now you can just type that in so you see 90 degrees and it would rotate it. The reason I did that is I want my front view facing here because this is going to be the front of the frame. Left click on this one and rotate this around. Over. And I'm going to go right down here, and that's where the swing arm's going to go. And let's drag that over here. So I'm going to go back to top view, and I'll show you a way to connect these. We're going to need a couple of different, I think this one can go all the way there. This one's going to have a few threads on this side. All right. Now, let's look at that again in front view. That's how it should fit together, and that's the location it's going to go. Let's bring in another one of these. Let's go insert. So we'll take another one of those top frame tubes and we'll insert it. All right, so it just gave us right where the last one went. We'll drag that over. All right, let's close that out. Let's make sure everything is aligned. Yeah. And then we can measure it, because we'll want the same amount of overhang here, but we'll want at least 16 inches between these two, because our motor mounts are going to be right at 16 inches long, and so will the top frame tube. The thing we need to do is rotate this one from the top view. So we're going to go 90 degrees. So again, I could just type in 90, and that'll rotate it for me. So it's not centered up perfectly because of how I moved it around initially, but that's okay. From top view, that looks good. From left, those are lined up well. So what I'm going to do is, this is just a way to kind of eyeball the distance between some of these. Oops, I held down my key too long. It's kind of a sticky key. Let me line these up. So I'm just holding down the left mouse key and making sure these are perfectly lined. Too much, you can scroll in and it'll move in smaller increments. I'm trying to use my key again, but I think it's messed up. I think there's something wrong with it, so it's going to move in too large of an increment. This will work here for what we're doing right now. Good. There we go. So we got that lined up. The holes are lining up on the other side. We don't see any overlap. The lower right hand corner, we're going to left click on that. We're going to measure. All right, so we want that at 2.217 max distance here. 2.2 in the X plane. Right now we're looking at X and Z from this angle. If I went to isometric view, you can see all the different planes that we'd be moving in, the 3 dimensions that we would be moving in. And you see those here. So you see X here, that's the distance we're currently measuring. So we're measuring the X distance here, Y distance, it shows it here, and then the Z distance. So those are looking at right now. So I'm going to go back to front view, and it's just going to show us Z and X. And the distance I measured over here, that was 2.178 inches, is that max distance. And you can't really see it from here, but there should be a red line. A red checkered line. It's just hard to see because those are highlighted. Let me see if I can. So from that line to that line, we're at almost right at 2 inches. And that should make sense because this was 3 inches of threads. This is an inch distance, so we want 2 inches of overhang. Let's go over. Yeah, we're almost there. Just a little bit more. And I could probably count the threads. And there are other ways of doing this. I'm just giving you the easiest way. All right, that's close enough for what we're doing right now. We'll work on different ways of assembling this. Now, we could, so that we can move this as one unit, have these interconnected. The next time we do an assembly, we'll deal with these fasteners. But this will be enough for this first video just to introduce you to some of the navigation on assembly view. So I've opened up our slicing software and I'm using Bambu Labs X1 Carbon. It's okay if you're using a different software, they have similar features. For most of our prints, I'm just going to use the default settings. So let's go ahead and go File, Import. I'm going to import 3MF, STL. These are exported as STL. So here are our two parts that we want to print. I'm going to go ahead and bring them in together. You'll notice I'm going to get a warning. So I don't want these as a single object with multiple parts. So they're not already pre-assembled. We're going to do our own assembling. So I've got an error message because not only are these touching, but one of these is 18.5 inches, which my print plate will only do about 10 inches, about 256 millimeters. I think that's what it is. All right, so I'm going to select one of those. So I left click, I'm going to drag it over. I'm going to left click this one, I'm going to place it on the plate where I want it to go. I'm going to scroll up here and I'm going to scale this because we're doing a small scale, a half scale of this frame so we don't waste a lot of resources. So we'll go 50% on that. That'll bring it down. So if it was 12 inches, it's now 6 inches. And this was 18.5. So we'll scale that down to 50% so that we can actually print it. So anytime I do small scale, I've got to make sure that what I'm building doesn't exceed my printing capacity. Essentially 10 inches cubed. All right, so that looks good. Everything's on the surface. So, to rotate, if you are using Bambu Labs, their slicing software for the first time, and you want to get an idea of how to move things around, I'm just holding down the left click button and that pulls that around. I can scroll in with the wheel, scroll out, and then if I right click and hold it down, I can move the plate. So orient it on the surface. So that's how you would navigate. So this has the threads in it. So we have some circles that cut all the way through. A lot of software will have you do supports, but I've printed these before and I know that they don't need supports. So I'm not going to enable that. If your software requires it, you can enable supports, but for this one, we don't need it. So we'll leave it out because it's a little bit more work to prep the surface to get these parts to fit together if we use supports. And I'm going to go ahead and print the whole part out instead of a test piece to see how they assemble, because I already know they fit together. Top left-hand corner, left click on preview, and it's going to make sure everything's correct. And I'll probably get a warning about those supports, but I'm going to disregard. That's our warning here. So It has floating regions, and so what it's worried that you might get some sagging here because there's nothing in between when it prints across, but it's a small enough surface, I know it's not going to be an issue. It tells me the total cost in filament, so about 39 cents. How long is it going to take? About 2 hours, total time, about 2 hours, 40 minutes. Now we'll go up here to print plate. Now I'm on a computer right now that is not connected to my printer, so I'll have to print this from home. But my printer would show up here. You can hit refresh, it goes through my Wi-Fi, and then I will send it out. So this is a build plate, and it, depending on the material that you're using, you can use this side for PLA and all your other materials like PETG and nylon. Those would go on the other side. Put down this layer of glue, the layer acts as a barrier, so it's easy to remove. You just want a nice thin layer, don't put too much on there. Then you can come over to your printer, slide that in there, and on the Bamboo X1 Carbon, that's a magnetic plate below it, and it just sticks to it. So we just finished our 3D print. So we'll take these over here. 3D print is done. You can just pull these off. Then I printed off with my 3D printer. It was a file that came with it. So we'll scrape that off. Get the older pieces off. And you go wash this off. This is a 3/8 tap. And so since this was 0.76 in actual scale, and then we scaled it down, a 3/8 fits it, and it'll clean those threads out. It matches it pretty well. And now that's going to run all the way down because we ran this one further through, so we really don't need that. So I'm going to get a little squeaking there at the end, but I want to make sure it runs all the way down on those threads. All right. So the reason I made these threads longer than these on this side is so that you could thread it in if it was still attached by these other tubes without having to disassemble the whole frame. You could run this one out, take it out, and then be able to put it back in. It's going to match what we've got so far in assembly view.